Hello and welcome to the third episode of Athlete's Journey, Winning on and Off the Field, a special podcast series on the financial journey of athletes through the eyes of some of Australia's most influential sporting figures. I'm Brent Read and today I'm joined by Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs CEO Aaron Warburton and Sydney Roosters CEO Joe Kelly. How are you guys?
Good morning, welcome. Very good. Thanks for having us.
We might as well start with a bit of a brief introduction, a brief summary of how you got to where you are today. Do you want to kick us off, Aaron?
Yeah, I've been involved in rugby league for a couple of decades, which is hard to actually say out loud, knowing that there's been some good years, some tough years, some really good years. So I started in 2002 with the Eels, straight out of school as a young sort of apprentice, working my way through the administrative side of rugby league. Whilst I studied along the way to end up at the Bulldogs first time around in 2010 as head of commercial, did that for a number of years before starting my own sports management marketing businesses, and then to come back as CEO in 2021. So 3 seasons at the helm, and it's been one heck of a ride.
Joe?
Yeah, you can probably tell by appearances, Reedy. Been around a long while in sport. Go back a little further than Aaron, but similar. 1995, started at the North Sydney Bears in their finance team. I was a finance department of one. Did 5 years there, including the move to the Central Coast, where we built the Central Coast Stadium. Went into the joint venture, Norths Manly, Waratahs for a stint after that, then across to the UK, where I was CFO at Chelsea for 5 years, back to Australia, 8 years at the Rabbitohs, then on to Manly for a couple as a CEO, and then now 6 years at the Roosters. So been a sort of CEO of a club for the last 8 years, and prior to that was a sort of finance-related roles.
You're both in the game a long time, and the game's changed a lot in that time, particularly from a financial viewpoint. There's a lot of money in rugby league now. Can you give us an idea about that change in terms of not just for footy clubs, but I mean, the amount of money players earn now it's just astronomical.
Yeah, and look, it's the old analogy of the more you make, the more you spend. I've seen that consistently through footy, and at any given point in time, there's a lot of money going around in the game. And yeah, I've seen it change, but in terms of it, has it been more sophisticated potentially? There's always been smart people around our game offering the right advice, the wrong advice, and everything in between. So it's a tricky space. And Joe, you'd probably seen it from a bit earlier in the days too.
Yeah, like I think early days, the clubs didn't have a real active role in, players and their, number one, probably even welfare, let alone financial advice, those sorts of things. But, I sort of look at it probably from 95 where the good player managers looked after their players well and probably did really well as a consequence of that. And then, you've seen an evolution over the last probably 10 to 12 years in our game with both the RLPA and the NRL taking a much more active role in ensuring players are well educated, first of all, which they are, and secondly, planning for careers and planning for their financial future as well.
So when you first started in the game, I assume there was players were given barely any, if any, financial advice.
No, and being involved in a finance role in a club, I can't recall ever really sitting down with a player and having any such discussions. And now you see where the evolution is, where we've got actually, specialists in this area embedded within our organisations as career coaches, etc. The NRL and RLPA are running really robust programs around, financial literacy for players. Everything from mortgages, equities, cryptocurrency, even information around that, so it can help support players in making decisions. And education, like we've still got about 25% of our NRL players across the code are actually still engaged in some form of education or work outside of playing NRL football. And below that, at 20s and below, you must study, you must work, or otherwise you don't play.
Is it a line you've got to walk a little bit as a club, because you've obviously got a salary cap you've got to abide by. There's certain rules around financial, not financial advice you can give, but how you can be involved in players' finance. So I assume you've got to...
Yeah, it's trying to understand whose responsibility it is. And I think a number of different stakeholders around the player needs to own their piece, whether that's all the way back to school and educating them as what financial literacy is, what investments look like. But I guess as a game and a club, we can be better. Just trying to work out where and how and balancing. These guys are professional athletes. Everything is all in on their trade, and that is rugby league. So it's just trying to find when and how, because information, presented at the wrong time isn't going to sink in. Presented at the right time with the right narrative around that. And look, it's individual. You've got a bunch of 30-odd guys who take in information differently, who are at different stages of their life, let alone how tired they are at the end of the day, the start of the day, how well they slept. There's so many factors that go into sort of educating. But again, whose role is educating the player?
I've always been quite conscious, even though I've sort of got a financial background, I know my limitations in terms of where I can sort of go to with players. And, I'm not a licensed, financial planner, etc. So I'll limit my discussions to, steering them in the right direction internally to our specialist in that space or back through RLPA, NRL. You're not offering products and services to them, but you're there to help them, do simple things like budget. Aaron talked about it before. It's all about how you can save as well. The money's enormous now, so your ability to actually save is important. So I think we can have a very general approach to it, but ultimately, you need to then pass that over to others that have that sort of level of expertise, and and sort of the players go from there.
The money's enormous, but probably the risk's enormous as well, because they can lose a lot of money if they make the wrong choices. And I would assume that it has the potential to impact how they play, how they train. Do you guys have to be aware of that? If players may be making some wrong choices financially and it's affecting their performance?
Yeah, I think it's like every single one of us, in life. If you've got distractions, you're not going to perform to the best of your ability in whatever your chosen career is. So, and financial outcomes that aren't positive will definitely lead to that. I know that financial stress is a significant impact on anyone's ability to function to the best of their ability. So yeah, absolutely, and and that's where knowing your players, having others in the organisation that are close to them as well, so you can sort of see any of those sorts of effects.
Isn't it interesting though? You look at the cross section of players, anyone from a 17-year-old to a 33, 34-year-old, very different. That sample of players, and the money they're earning, the lifestyle they want to live versus where they need to be, versus trying to get them out of the mould of, that's their rugby league career versus hopefully a life of 80, 90 years, and probably not going to earn, that income, have the disposable income. But like anything, people make mistakes, and sometimes the mistakes are your best way to learn too.
It's not a one-size-fits-all thing, right?
That's right.
You're right.
And I think the approach is. So that's probably where there needs to be improvement, and hence why I don't know if it's a club-owned or an NRL-owned. I think it's a good discussion point. But
the game has taken a lot more responsibility in that area. Not so much clubs to an extent, but the game itself, right, has taken.
Yeah, they have.
Can you compare the financial advice maybe the game gave players 30 years ago to what it does now?
Oh, it's so different. Like, as I say, I don't recall any real advice being provided at that point in time. Now, now we've got a number of people internally that actually work in this space, in a permanent capacity, and then on top of that, you've got external providers coming in and offering that sort of independent advice. That's not actually invest in this or invest in that. It's more about upskilling players, giving them the tools to understand what are potentially pitfalls. So there's lots of risk. More money you got, lots of risks attached to that too. So giving them sort of the necessary tools to sort of be able to navigate through that sort of cycle. But I look at it the fact that a player's sort of life as a player career is fairly short, and so this is their first career. So setting them up for what's going to be a much longer second career is significantly important, and the game itself has taken a very active role in that, which is really good, and the clubs have got right behind it.
The other aspect of that is the world changes constantly, right? You mentioned crypto before. 10 years ago, no one knew what it was. So there's this, and the players, some players can see that as a quick sugar hit, right? So it's important that they keep getting educated on that sort of thing and the perils of it, correct?
I think, and like Joe was talking about there's the players are, again, a cross-section of society. I think a number of people, myself included, got swept up in what was crypto and what was NFTs, and everyone was Googling, the next big thing. And it comes down to, I guess, your risk, but also your level of education. If you've got research as a key driver as to how you invest, and if you're 1 out of 10, you're probably going to stay away from crypto. If you're a 9 out of 10 and you live sort of life, and a lot of these players have, taken risks in their career just to, get back on the field, or, they've missed certain things to excel in their field. They're pretty risk adverse guys and girls now. So it is tricky. And I think it's a pretty cluttered marketplace when it comes to advice, where everyone's got it. But in terms of where the trust lies, and, who is reputable enough from a club's perspective to be recommended to a player. Like I said, it's a bit of a it's unknown in the sense it's been happening for quite a while. But look, you're working with 600 players. I don't think there's one method.
I was going to say, what's really interesting, Reedy, is that you look at the statistics of surveys they do with our players, and that, and recently that, their post-career is obviously, top of, the rankings in terms of what they're focused on, after their football career. But it's coming a very close second, and sort of all intertwined anyway, is just financial planning. So players are really focused on, getting that advice now, so they can set themselves up for the future. So we've moved a long way. The whole tide's risen enormously around just education and all those sorts of things that, will hopefully most players will stand them in good stead into the future.
Well, I think the smart players, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, though, footy clubs tend to be surrounded by smart, savvy financial people these days, and the smart players know how to tap into those people for advice, right? Because the way the game has exploded financially, there's people around it who have successful people who've made a lot of money. And if you're a smart football player, you can go to them for advice or talk to those sort of people.
Yeah, we see, and again, that hasn't changed over time. I think what's coming a bit more of a trend now is that type of copycat investing. So if you're seeing something work for someone that's close to you and there's trust and you build a nice relationship, you can follow that in terms of that investment. That's a pretty straightforward system. However, it's who's around you, who's advising you, who's got any vested interest, which, let's be honest, there might be a bit of that floating around. So it's rugby league clubs tend to attract like-minded people that the top percentile of them, make a heap of money.
Do you guys take pride out of seeing a player look at finance, going to do something with his money and become a success? Like, do you take a personal interest? Can you afford to do that? Take a personal interest in it?
Absolutely. You want to see everyone sort of, succeed and achieve. And, this career is a fairly short career, as I said. And one of the biggest challenges is replicating this level of remuneration moving forward. So, and that's something that's difficult to solve. There's certainly a number of individuals that go off into, roles within the game, etc., and do very well. But, you'd say the majority are finding another source of employment. So to actually be able to do that and earn anywhere near their current level in some cases is a real challenge. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, you see often hear stories about players buying their first house or buying a house for their parents, which I imagine as a person who's in charge of almost their pay packet. When you hear that sort of story,
it's rewarding, particularly with the rest of the playing squad, right? People see and they can believe and they can achieve it themselves. And it doesn't often happen where a player, it might be their first contract they're able to with their income, but it normally comes with a plan. In 3 years, I want to be able to, or 5 years, I want to be able to. And to Joe's point, in 10 years, I want to be able to have a recurring income that can sustain my lifestyle and my family's or future family's lifestyle. And there's so many unknowns. That's the key. So if something's worked in the past, that's you're half a chance.
And we talk about those around the club and us sort of providing support, and those internally that are experts in this space. But probably that locker room chat is probably the most important chat. That's probably where the influence really sits as well. So seeing someone do well in that space probably does leave others sort of thinking about their own futures a lot more and what they can do about it as well.
And unfortunately, that locker room chat last year and the year before was crypto.
Yes.
So it was the quick wins.
Yeah. Well, I mean, footballers you're right, they're very like-minded people, right? So what's the old saying? If one gets a cold, if one sneezes, everyone catches a cold,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So it's important you have leaders in your footy club who can lead, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. No, both of you guys have, I think, got those sort of guys in the footy club.
Yeah.
So you rely on them a little bit as well.
Yeah, and in the coaching team and the alumni that sit around them. And you hear the old stories of players, you know, they might move from a $100,000 contract straight to a 4 or 5, and it's like, well, you were living quite well on $100,000. What are you going to do with the extra 400? Should that go directly into a savings account? Should that be, only touched in 5 years, high interest earning, whatever it is? But like I said, you make more, you tend to spend more. And that's, you've earned that. So you should be able to sort of increase your lifestyle in and around that. But in saying that, everyone, has their own goals. And if that's looking after people around you or whatever it is, and you've got to sort of you've got to account for that. But in saying that, there's, the increase in salary isn't going to slow down. The caps just increase. You give it 4 or 5 years, it's going to go up again. There's going to be the same people around giving the same advice. It's
probably worth looking at that because the cap's now about 11.4, is it? I think the average wage is about, I think it's around nearly $400,000 now, right?
And the minimum. So that goes up to 120. And that's a big jump for a lot of young kids at a young age.
That's a 50% jump on the minimum wage alone. So it's significant.
But the average career, I think the average career is only
a few years,
3 or 4 years, right? So, it's important that players make good decisions when they're earning that sort of money early in their career.
And you go into, I guess, a football career knowing that it is 3 to 4 years, but you're always thinking it's going to be 10 plus. But using, if that drives you behind the scenes, it says this could end at any given point, and having those systems in place. And look, easier said than done. These guys are committed to titles and being the best version of themselves while they can, and you'd never take that away from them. But Joe said it earlier, you see some of the best results when guys are in a nice financial space. They're comfortable. There's not as many distractions or threats around them. So
I assume that's something you've got to remind them of. It would be a bit of a balancing act because they've got this footballers think they're indestructible. They've got this great belief they're going to play forever. But you're right, the average career is, I think it's 2, 3, 4 years. Is that something that they get reminded of?
Well, I've seen situations where you've seen players, that have ended their careers come back and actually have these chats too, So I think there is a reminder there, and sometimes a quite current reminder of someone who's just retired from the club. Players are quite open at times about, their own journey. Their own journey from, the time they arrive at a club as a kid, 16, 15, or whatever it is, right through to the end of their first grade career. And we do use that. We've, in ourselves, at the Roosters, we've got, an academy, and, we've got, Mitch Orbison heading that up, and, Jake Friend's involved as well. And part of that is those guys telling their story of how they've, started at the Roosters and went all the way through and played their careers at the Roosters. And that's powerful. It's powerful, because they're recently retired, and those messages, I think, more so than coming up and sitting down in the CEO's office and, talking about budgets and things like that. It's actually talking to your peers and those players they would have looked up to as well.
Do you think, is there a gap at the moment in the game or weakness in terms of that financial advice? Is there something you think maybe the game could do better on that front?
I'm pretty happy. Sorry, Aaron. I'm pretty comfortable personally where things are at. I think the game's doing a really good job. I think everyone in the game is doing a really good job. I don't really see too much of a weakness. As I say, the biggest challenge will be for players to really, prepare themselves, the majority of them, for what's possibly a significant change in income, post football.
Yeah, I think and again, it's been happening for decades, is at what point in a player's career do you really need to flick the switch around, what you're going to do after football? And you got guys in their early 20s who know they might have a trade, they're working on the weekends, they've got aspirations to have their own business. It's such a unique individual journey for a lot of these athletes. And as a game, to Joe's point, overarching, there's a nice sort of flavour to what is financial literacy, and at least having those tools around them. A couple of times a year, the players will get together. We ran a financial literacy course separate to the NRLs last year for anyone under 23. So we had everyone. There was probably about 11, 12 in the room. Our CFO got up and actually broke down a salary. So from 150K, take away your agent fee, take away the GST and the agent fee, take away the tax. This comes down, that's what you're getting per week. And he sort of ended that with anyone that wants any more information, book a meeting. And probably half of them said, we want to know more. And that's the basics of a pay slip, right? Mm-hmm. But that hadn't been educated to them in the past. And if you think back to your school years, you're 11 and 12, unless you were into commerce and you wanted to be, open your own investment firm, you probably just, you breezed over that one. Yeah. And that's the majority of our players.
Is that an ongoing thing you think you'll do?
Yeah, that'll be an annual thing now. Yeah, it was John's initiative internal to say, look, I get too many questions on this. I'm going to pull them all together. And we're going to, get some questions going. And it was very quiet early, as you can imagine, and towards the end. And then even, as I said, after the event, it was a number one seller.
It was an eye-opener for them.
It was. It was just understanding that it's, and particularly if you're budgeting, if you're 150K and you're budgeting to 150, but that's not hitting your bank account, obviously, but it's not that obvious. What
about a bit of financial advice or a pearl of wisdom that you guys have personally been given over the years that you can share?
I think we've touched on it before a few times. Aaron has, certainly. Is it just around, and you've said it too, Reedy, like salaries are escalating, in the game significantly. And every 5 years, we'll hit a new high point. There will be another history-making CBA.
Mm-hmm.
Just through
still haven't got this one done, Joe.
But through the nature of the broadcast deal, hopefully, being optimistic, it'll always be a record CBA if done. I think that one of the pieces of advice I got early days was it's not what you earn, it's what you save. So just being really responsible around saving. And then that nothing's easy. Nothing's easy. Money doesn't come easy. So don't go down that path of what you think's the easy outcome. I don't know whether crypto sits into that space or not. I never got into it. I really need to have that education piece because I don't understand it still myself. But ultimately, be very conscious. And that's where the tools are being provided to the players now around those sorts of, riskier types of investments. So, money doesn't come easy. That's a myth.
Mine's quite simple too, in the sense that any of my investments over the years have been based on something I've been comfortable with, something I know, something I've been able to research myself. You're never going to have a completely risk-adverse strategy at any given time. But if you don't enjoy property investing or you don't understand the share market, don't touch it or touch it with maybe 10% of your investment strategy. I think for me, it's been understanding what makes property rise and the cycles and just actually looking at data previously. Those things aren't too complicated, but I don't think you need to scratch the surface any more than that to actually delve into any particular investment. So if you're just listening to someone with no inclination, then you probably only have yourself to blame if it doesn't go well. So I wouldn't be putting any money into anything that I don't at least have a comfortable level of understanding of.
Well, that's some great advice to finish on. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Joe. And stay tuned for the next podcast soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Reedy.